Sustainability Commission meeting. In keeping with the Oregon Public Meetings Law, statutory land use hearing requirements, and Title 33 of the Portland City Code, the Portland Planning Sustainability Commission is holding this meeting virtually, as you can tell. All members of the PSC are attending remotely, and the city has made several avenues available for the public to watch the broadcast of this meeting. The PSC is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and promote social distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience and your sense of humor, flexibility, and understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. For the record, these commissioners are present on today's call. I'm Commissioner Spivak. We have Commissioner Ralph, Schultz, Bacharach, Portalazzo, Hauk, Larcel, and Smith. And I'm looking to see if we have Commissioner Magnera or Quinosa. If not now, perhaps we'll join in later, but we have plenty for quorum. So we'll begin with commissioners, any items of interest, and I'll look for some virtual hands raised. Because frankly, I can't see everyone on the screen at once. It's two screens for me. I see one from Steph.
I just want to thank everyone who has voted already, and our recognition that our wonderful vote by mail system allows us to do so in a physically distanced way, and that Multnomah County elections say that the 14th is the last day to safely mail your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Commissioner Magnera is joining us as well, so we're almost 100% here. Andrea, would you please give us the director's report?
I will. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to update everyone on our budget process. The City Council had a budget hearing, work session today, and walking through citywide budget. For BPS, I just wanted to recap the economic cuts and the situation in across the city in terms of the 75 million projected shortfall the city is facing. All bureaus have been directed to do furloughs, up to 10 days of furloughs for non-represented staff, putting a freeze on merit and COLA adjustments, and also curtailing materials and services in our budget. But I wanted just to reaffirm for the commission that with those cuts that we've made and put in place, we are still able to retain all of our staff, so which we're very happy about. We're really looking to avoid layoffs of BPS staff. We are expecting another wave of budget directions and cuts to happen associated with the fall timeline, the fall bump process. So we'll get more clarity and directions on that in early June. For our budget requests that we've submitted, I just wanted to give a quick update. We requested moving forward with hiring for the Portland Clean Energy Fund staff, which was approved and reflected in the mayor's proposed budget. We asked for additional funds for support advancing our actions on climate. And while we didn't get the entire amount we requested, the mayor's budget includes $100,000. So we'll be able to move forward on a renewable fuels program, which is the first area that we'll be working there. Our request to do anti-displacement work was not proposed in the mayor's budget, but we are going to continue to do that work, advance that work as planned, and we're doing that by not replacing some vacant positions that we have currently. And the work on floodplains was acknowledged, but delayed to the fall because that work doesn't have to begin right now. We're waiting for FEMA to give directions. We don't have to start that work any earlier than the fall. So we expect that we'll come back to council and get approval for the floodplain work later this fall. And so I just wanted to kind of thank again the commission members who engaged in the budget process, Commissioners Larcel and Magnera. Really appreciate their participation in the Budget Advisory Committee process. And this evening from 6:30 to 8:30, there will be a community budget hearing. So if any of the commissioners are interested in providing any testimony, they're taking written testimony. They've closed the list for people to testify in person, virtually. But that is, you can tune in tonight from 6:30 to 8:30. And then just a quick recap on what we have coming up with our items on City Council agenda on May 14th, this Thursday. We have the expanding opportunities for affordable housing, the work with that you all heard a couple of months ago, working with faith-based organizations and community-based organizations to expand affordable housing opportunities. So that'll start on Thursday. And then May 28th is when we will bring Central City readoption.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Jeff. Yeah.
Andrea, thank you. You mentioned some additional FTE for the Clean Energy Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, are those going to be paid directly from the income that fund gets, or is that your budget?
No, that's all of the Portland Clean Energy Fund staff are paid for and covered by the revenue generated from that clean energy surcharge.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's go to the consent agenda. Would someone like to move passage of the consent? Jeff, your hand's still up. Would you like to?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Move adoption.
I'll second.
Thank you, Steph. And should we do a roll call on this, or can we just do all hands raised? I'll say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Put your hands up. I see everybody with their hands up.
Aye.
That consent agenda passes. And yes, Mike.
Are you keeping an eye on we're using the electronic hand raise, is that correct?
We're supposed to do that. Thanks for the reminder. I saw them both going up.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll continue with the electronic hand raise. Today's meeting, we got two big agenda items. The first, we're excited to have the climate emergency resolution coming back to the PSC before it heads to City Council. That's currently it was drafted. Many people provide comment on it, and they've not yet created the second draft. After that, we're going to switch over to the River Plan Southeast for our first work session. So that's what's in store. We'll go until 3:30. And to start off, I'd love to invite Michelle Krim, Elisa Kane, and Amanda Watson to the front of the room. And please introduce the plan for us. Thanks.
Okay, great. So my name is Michelle Krim. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And with me are Elisa Kane, the Climate Action Manager from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and Amanda Watson, a Policy Advisor for Climate and Sustainability in the Mayor's Office. And actually, Amanda, I think I'll just turn it over to you to get us started. Our plan today is just to give you a bit of context and overview to remind you, we've come and talked with you once before, but we want to reorient you to what this climate emergency declaration effort is, how we got here, what our process has been to this point, and then we're going to share with you some of the feedback that we got from the public comment process, which you have been forwarded a summary document that contains a lot more details than what we'll be going through. We'll be sharing with you some of the things that we're looking at doing to modify the draft based on that feedback. And then we're going to be interested in your feedback as well, so that we can incorporate that into the updated draft of the document. So with that, we're between the three of us, we're going to sort of hand off to each other to cover different pieces of this. And so I think Amanda will get us started.
Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon now, everyone. Good to see everyone's faces, and thanks for having us today. So I'm just going to start with kind of a high-level overview, like Michelle said, of the Climate Emergency Declaration. I know this isn't new to you all, and you kind of saw the first version, but just as a reminder, so in response to community advocacy, asking the city to declare a climate emergency, BPS and the Mayor's Office actually started this work back in summer of last year, summer of 2019. And there was a version 1 of the Climate Emergency Declaration that happened a lot of it internally. So bureaus had some really great ideas for new climate actions, took some plans off the shelves, dusted them off, and we had a very long first version of that Climate Emergency Declaration that was almost like a mini climate action plan. a lot of actions that bureaus were, wanting to commit to. And when that went publicly, we got a lot of feedback from community members. Youth climate activists were very vocal, and other members of the climate justice community here. Concerned that this climate emergency declaration wasn't responsive to what community members had asked for, both because the actions laid out weren't generated with community input, and the declaration didn't adequately address climate justice and reflect climate justice concerns. And so in the fall of last year, the mayor's office directed the Bureau of Planning Sustainability to take some more time to really go back to community, do a lot more outreach, and listen to hear, what community members wanted to include in the climate emergency declaration to ensure that it was meaningful, right? And it really had a strong emphasis on climate justice. And so huge, appreciation for Elisa and Michelle and, other folks in their team, but particularly those two led that process over the fall and early winter, just listening to community groups. And I'll let Elisa go into a little more of the engagement process later, but where that brought us was to this first draft of the climate emergency declaration that I believe was presented to you all. And I know some of you provided feedback during the public comment period, which is very much appreciated as well. And then, again, we'll go through kind of that summary of comments. But what the climate emergency declaration does, and this draft that we are now kind of working on updating does, first and foremost, this is a document that lays out and sets the stage for how the city is going to be approaching climate action going forward. And that is very explicitly with a climate justice lens and taking a climate justice approach. So the whereas section, the first part of the resolution, it recognizes that, frontline communities in Portland are hit first and worst by the impacts of climate change. It recognizes that we are in a climate emergency, right? We need to do more to address the climate crisis, and that we have to do that differently, right? So we've done, Portland has historically been praised for being a leader. We took a lot of early action in climate. We did a lot of kind of the low-hanging fruit actions, and we really now need innovative thinking. We need to approach things differently and with a climate justice lens to make those deep emissions cuts that we need to make to meet our energy goal or emissions reduction goals. And specifically, the climate emergency declaration does update our goals, right? So it sets our targets to at least 50% reduction from 1990 levels by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And then kind of beyond that, so the approach that we took with this, rather than doing kind of a laundry list of actions with this, is really to set out the principles and the values, right? So climate justice at the center, centering the leadership of youth and frontline communities. It sets out the priorities for action. So again, focusing on our largest emitting sectors like buildings and transportation, and then it sets out a process for how we're getting there. And so this is what we'll touch on later, but in the first draft is called the climate, the governance structure of kind of this process with community involvement of coming up with climate strategies going forward. So I think that's kind of a broad overview. I do want to let Elisa kind of pop in and give some more detail on the engagement that she did to get from this version 1 of the draft to the draft that you all saw that we put up for public comment in February. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Elisa Kane. I work for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I would like to characterize the time between October and early February of this year as really a puzzle making. We had some of the edges already put together, but really what was missing was a lot of the image on the inside. And we were able to reach out to a real kind of wide variety of community organizations that either work on climate related issues directly or are starting to connect their work, whether it's on anti-displacement, racial justice, social justice causes to climate. And so just through the very kind of nature of starting to talk to groups such as the PCEF Coalition, and certainly some of the activist groups like Sunrise Movement PDX and some of the youth groups, we were able to then piece in other voices who in the past haven't been part of our climate work and haven't been directly engaged. And so it's both the beginning of a relationship that we're forming with a broad array of organizations, peoples, and community leaders working on climate, and also really to show up in that space as a city of Portland, but really to listen carefully to what the priorities were for those community groups. What are some of the things that they're experiencing? We heard quite a bit of people feeling in the past, feeling left out of the process and wanting to understand where they best have capacity to plug into a climate conversation. We also heard that we as a city need to really center frontline communities who are impacted first and worst by climate change already in Portland. So over that time, we were able to reach about 50 different organizations. Some of those were just simple one touch or a couple conversations. Some were much more engaged. And through that process, we were able to piece together the version 1 of the draft climate emergency that you've seen, hopefully reflecting back what we heard. And certainly then as public comment came in, we were able to then really deepen our understanding of what community priorities are, what the processes should be for how we start doing our climate work in the future, and really where are some of the opportunities that we may have not yet looked at to really reduce carbon emissions in a way that benefits community.
Okay, well, thank you. I think is this a chance for us to all ask questions and then decide whether we want to weigh in on this as a commission, although some of us have done that individually. So if someone wants to use your hands raised to make some comments, then I'll call on us as we go.
Eli, we were going to take a little bit of time to go through what we heard from the public and what we're proposing to update and change in the document, if that would be helpful. And then I think then you'll have a full picture of what we're proposing to do. And then you can help us find where there's maybe some gaps or some additional thinking we need to be doing to address sort of what you're seeing.
Sorry, I jumped in. That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay,
Good.
All right, great.
Thank you. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen here so you can see the summary document. You should all have in your email, but that way we can see it together. So hopefully this will work. Nope. Maybe I can. I don't know if Julie, you can maybe give me screen sharing permission, but if not, we can go through it orally because everyone should have that document somewhere in your email as well. So, here we go. Let's see if this works. Thanks, Julie. Can folks see the summary of comments on my screen now? Okay, great. So we put together this document because we received over 300 public comments during our public comment period, which was great. A lot of them were very substantive, very thoughtful, really appreciative of all the time that folks put towards giving us feedback on the draft resolution, including many of you, so thanks again. This first part is just an outline of the engagement process, including a number of the groups that we reached out to, and Elisa, that kind of sums up what Elisa provided earlier. But this document is organized in terms of kind of general supporting comments we got, opposing comments, and then the bulk of comments were supportive of the city declaring a climate emergency, but provided feedback in terms of what updates or revisions they'd like to see to the draft. And so we'll spend most of our time there, kind of give you an overview, and I don't want to go line by line through this, but talk more about how we are planning to update the draft based on this feedback. So overall, a lot of supportive comments around, the need to recognize the climate emergency and the appreciation of the focus on climate justice and the need to really center frontline communities, including youth and youth from frontline communities, in how we approach climate action going forward. There's a variety of opposing comments as well. Folks were concerned around whether or not the climate emergency declaration might, result in increased taxes or could draw resources away from other community priorities that they felt were more important, including addressing homelessness. I'm not going to go through everything because you have this here, but definitely, a handful of concerns, although the majority were supportive, asking for revisions. And so one of the main themes that I'll start with that came across in the comments suggesting revisions was that despite kind of the initial feedback we got on the first version of the climate emergency declaration that there were too many actions that weren't community generated, we did get a lot of comments asking us for more action in this this draft. And so how we are proposing to approach that is really to focus, kind of as I said, we're focusing on principles and values, we're focusing on the priorities, and we're focusing on process. And we are including specific actions where those are actions that the city is already committed to, is underway, and don't live in other documents. So for example, the work the city is doing to advocate with Community for Youth Pass, the climate test development, right, that was part of the mayor's climate commitments in December. and kind of other pieces that aren't in, for example, the 100% renewables resolution or the 2015 cap. So kind of these underway or already identified as a community priority that we wanted to put into this resolution, but we're not adding a number of new actions that don't have that status, because we want to be able to provide space for the collaborative process with community to really identify specific actions under the kind of priorities for actions that this declaration lays out. So this kind of just context for, a lot of folks ask for more detail, and we have this balancing act between needing to put in a good amount of detail, but not wanting to preempt the collaborative process that needs to happen once this declaration is passed. So the first section here is language and definitions. A lot of folks asking for clearer definitions of things. Again, this was a balancing act. We recognize that we wanted a definition of climate justice to be community generated. And so we talk about climate justice, but it's not specifically defined in the declaration. We are updating the declaration to include more around a just transition and explicitly including labor and workers in where we talk about frontline communities, because we got feedback that didn't show up strongly enough in the first draft of the resolution. Let's see. I'm not gonna stop me if there's something specific that you want on this, want to kind of dig into on each category, but otherwise I'm just gonna hit on kind of the main points here. The next section was goals, timeline, and scope. And I think, Michelle, I'll turn it over to you for this one.
Okay, yeah. So in this sort of this theme of the type of feedback that we got, there was a fair amount of public comment wanting to see more interim targets. We're proposing updates to our existing 2030 and 2050 emission reduction targets, and feedback that 2030 is too far out. We need more interim targets. Also comments wanting more aggressive timelines, that wanting to see us get to net zero much sooner than 2050. Were also comments wanting to see, as Amanda was alluding to, more specific timelines. So where we could get more specific about actions, also being more specific about timelines in terms of when those things would happen. And then lastly, feedback around wanting to see better connections made to other regional governments and agencies and more regional efforts, state and federal action, including carbon pricing, and that more directives given to businesses, nonprofits, and other institutions in terms of that sort of collective action. And so some of the changes that we're looking at in the document is to look at identifying what more near-term sort of guideposts in terms of emission reduction targets would look like, to help us know if we're on track to reach those 2030 and 2050 goals. It's fairly complicated to figure out how to go about doing that. There's a lot of variation from year to year, so it's not a straight line. You can't sort of calculate it that way, but we are looking at what it would look like to create some sort of guideposts to help guide us along the way and help us know if we're on track. And so we're in the process of updating the carbon emissions inventory right now. And as soon as we have the updated data, we would be looking at figuring out what those interim targets or guideposts could look like. We're also looking to add in some more specifics around timelines where it makes sense to do so, adding some language in terms of coming back to City Council with progress reports, the first one being proposed for the first quarter of 2021, so that there's a way to sort of either make sure we're hitting those timelines or be building in those timelines through guidance and directions from City Council on an ongoing basis. And then that would be also an opportunity for us to come back to the PSC to give you updates on how things are being implemented that are contained in the declaration. And then lastly, adding a little more language related to coordination and collaboration with regional partners as well as state and federal levels. And so I think with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda, to go over the next section.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so the next theme was related to authority and accountability. So kind of touching on the reporting, folks really, wanted to see more accountability for the city to carry out the goals and the commitments in the resolution. And so I think the work that we'll do to kind of put a finer point on reporting requirements will help to address part of that. The other piece related to accountability and authority was some commenters asking for the declaration to be a binding resolution, include specific changes to city code, or invoke the Title 15 emergency code. And so, the mayor's office and city council is not intending the climate emergency declaration to invoke Title 15. There's kind of a lot behind that. And I'm working with the city attorneys to put a little finer point on that. But we do have the option to make this, add a clause in the resolution that this is binding city policy. And I think we'll be doing that. Again, it's a resolution rather than an ordinance. And so it doesn't change city code, but that's kind of adds a little bit of a weight to it and should hopefully help to kind of go towards conveying the seriousness of this resolution and the commitments in it. There was a lot of additions for accountability related language. So wanting the declaration to be more explicit around, the causes of climate change, right? That it's not just everyone, but it's specifically, fossil fuel companies, large businesses and the wealthy that contribute disproportionately to the problem, that white supremacy is an underlying cause of the climate crisis. And so we're working on kind of updating language too, to be more explicit around making sure that the way that we're talking about things in the resolution is conveying accountability right towards the right parties. It's not too general. This last piece relating to the city's share of responsibility in historically racist land use policies and gentrification. Again, we have some of that language in there, but taking a finer look, and I'm working with council offices to kind of calibrate what folks are comfortable with, but we do want to make sure that we are as kind of honest about the city's role in this as well in the declaration. So again, kind of the language, but also the reporting and accountability piece. Resources was another strong theme. So a lot of people asking both around the budget for climate and the city's budget to carry out specific actions in the declaration, and also a strong theme around the need for the city to resource frontline community members to participate fully in climate action planning. So I'll start with that one because that is, very, the mayor's office, city council, and, BPS recognizes that that's important. And so, sorry, my clock is going off. I'm gonna. And so we are updating the language in the resolution to make it clear that there will be, I'm just gonna, it stopped. Sorry about that. Putting a finer point that when we're convening this collaborative process between community and the city and the county to update, climate action planning, that we will need to be providing resources for frontline community members to engage. And so that comes from a few different sources. So BPS does have budget currently allocated that can go towards resourcing and engaging with community members in climate action planning. The county, we've heard from the county chair's office that they're very committed to this. They don't have kind of a budget line item that they've shared with us yet, but they are committed to putting their own resources towards it. And then we'll be working collaboratively also to bring funders to the table and to pursue grant opportunities where there are opportunities so that community members can come to this space with their own funding that's not tied to the city or the county, because that also kind of can impact the power dynamic in that space. So we're very committed to resourcing that work and wanting to be as explicit as we can in a resolution around that there will be resources to carry out the work. Andrea gave an update around the budget, the mayor's proposed budget for this coming fiscal year. So as you know, there are resources for climate in that, and I think we're not going to be putting again, specific dollar amounts in the resolution just because of the nature of the document, but we'll make sure that when this is coming to city council, the mayor and commissioners can be very explicit about the funding that the city does have to make sure that the actions in the declaration will happen. So I'm going to kick it over to Elisa now. I think this is probably one of the bigger areas that we got comments on, the governance structure, and that also all of you, I think, some of you have shared some great feedback, and I think will be a good topic for us to dive into.
We can't hear you yet, Elisa.
Okay, there we go. Hi there. So dovetailing into the conversation about resources, there was a lot of feedback about our proposed language around a governance structure. And admittedly, in hindsight, that might not have been the best placeholder language for us, but it certainly solicited a lot of comments. So really, the feedback is that there were a lot of question marks about the governance structure, who it included, who it didn't include, how it was going to be resourced, really to how the decision-making authority would be decided upon. Certainly there are folks that felt like it centered too much on a certain community and not enough on others. And then conversely, the same community was focused on too little. So I think as we look to further evolve the thinking around this governance structure, and really it's a place for engagement. It was a placeholder to talk about how we're going to engage community in both looking at our climate action plans itself, but also really as a space to unpack potential for reducing carbon emissions in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past through the kind of more linear process that we might have taken. And we also just acknowledge that there's this tension between setting up a decision-making authority within a structure that already has a pretty well-defined decision-making authority, ultimately with City Council making decisions on ordinances and resolutions moving forward. So with all that in mind, as we evolve our thinking with our Multnomah County as a partner in this, we are trying to take a multi-pronged approach to engagement. We recognize there's not a one-size-fits-all body that's going to be able to, shoulder the burden of creating a lot of different conversations around how we do climate action in the future. Certainly, there's multiple types of expertise that we both want to acknowledge, whether that's technical or lived experience. We think it's important to have forums for both of those things and for the city and the county to really take that feedback equally. So we are going to be looking at creating a couple of different avenues that won't be as clearly defined probably in the next resolution as with finer points and kind of sharpened pencils. But really what we're trying to talk about is acknowledging that we need a lot of different voices to come to the table. We are going to create space to center frontline communities and to acknowledge community-led climate action, as we've seen emerging very strongly, that we are going to be able to unlock a lot more carbon emission reductions if we can really understand where we can create community benefits that reduce carbon emissions. And so we are proposing a space, a kind of a third space to have those conversations, kind of a climate justice initiative that really looks at our carbon emissions with a climate justice lens, and then hopefully identifies actions that might unpack further emission reductions. We also understand we will be including industry, whether that's utilities, businesses, and other organizations that have been very active in the climate space for decades and have really helped Portland achieve our admirable carbon emission reductions. And so what we all know, use this climate emergency declaration as a way to underscore our commitment to looking at our climate actions differently, and that is with a climate justice lens. And so we expect this third space to be less about governance and less about a formal process, but really a place to explore, unpack, iterate, evolve, express potential actions for us to consider in a new way. And we may be trying to unpack things like how do we reduce energy use, for example, in the residential sector, but doing that with a climate justice lens really gives us a different opportunity to pull apart some of the things, the more systemic things that are probably holding us up from making those deep dive carbon emission reductions. So I will just acknowledge that we heard people loud and clear that a governance structure was not quite what people were looking for, and in fact caused a lot of confusion because we understand there's plenty of government in government. And what we want to do is be able to find this third space where we can equalize the power dynamic between city and county government, our community leaders. And we do think that there are some foundations, certainly under our new context, we'll be, looking carefully at funding and want to make sure that we're being sensitive to other priorities. But we also recognize there are foundations, there's probably industry partners that would want to be able to fund looking at carbon emissions and our potential to reduce carbon emissions from a different perspective. So I think you'll see in the next version a more thought out version of what we're evolving from a governance structure to creating multiple opportunities for people to have their voices heard, and certainly could see, as we continue with the Planning and Sustainability Commission, having that be one of them. And I think we'll probably end up talking a little bit more about this in the future, but that to me kind of summarizes what we've heard and kind of iteration that we're trying to put forward in our next version.
Thanks, Elisa. Yeah, and I think we'll run through the rest of this, fairly succinctly, and then we'll leave time for more discussion. So the next kind of area that we got comments on was related to the climate test. So this is work that, as I mentioned before, is underway. The mayor committed to developing a climate test in December as part of the kind of internally looking climate commitments. And this was an ask, particularly from youth activists. The feedback we got was that looking at an internal price in carbon is not quite what folks wanted out of a climate test. They wanted something that was broader and that could be applied to permitting decisions as well. And so we're looking to update that language. You all know my colleague Sam Diaz from the mayor's office. He's working with BDS to kind of figure out what is kind of acceptable language for them, because BDS would obviously have a very strong role in a climate test that looked at permitting and looked at kind of decisions beyond internal city decisions. But we're going to continue to develop the internal facing climate test that's really looking at procurement, and we'll put a marker for the development of a tool that can be used in permitting. So our colleagues at BPS tell us, there's already kind of tools that can take into account the embodied carbon related with infrastructure projects. It's just a matter of needing to learn kind of lessons from the first step of the internal version, and then work with stakeholders really to on kind of a broader version of a climate test that can more address kind of what community members were asking for here. So our update will put a nod towards that work, but there's kind of a lot more work that needs to happen for us to get there.
Okay. This is Michelle again. I'll talk about the feedback we got related to natural systems and agriculture. There was a fair amount of feedback just wanting to see more incorporated about the role of and the need to protect, restore, and expand green infrastructure and natural systems. Also comments related to, quite a number of comments related to expanding the urban tree canopy and the role that urban trees play, with a particular focus on those neighborhoods and communities that currently don't have a lot of trees and needing to expand the tree canopy in those areas. And then lastly, there were a handful of comments related to farms and food supply and the relationship of those things to the climate crisis. And so what we're looking to do in terms of updates to the document includes adding additional whereas types of statements related to the climate impacts on natural systems, particularly the urban forest, expanding language about the importance of protecting and restoring natural resources, including the role in reducing risks, sequestering carbon, and building resilience. And so some of that language was in there. We're looking to add to that and particularly add some more language related to the tree canopy. And then we'll also be looking to add some specific directives focused on updating regulations that protect and restore flood areas as well as tree canopy, and to do that in ways that reduce risks, protect property, and improve public health. Similar sorts of feedback going on to the next section related to adaptation. Similar feedback that the resolution was too focused on just reducing carbon emissions, or mitigation as it's called, and wanting to see more language added related to adapting to the projected impacts of climate change. Also wanting to see more of a focus on the disparate impacts of climate change on frontline communities and the need to prioritize those communities when we're working on resilience and preparation and adaptation actions. And so we're looking to add more language about the projected climate impacts, particularly related to heat and flooding. So some language is already in there, but again, rounding that out a little bit more, getting more explicit about some of those impacts. And then also adding language about ensuring that resilience and adaptation measures consider and address potential displacement and accessibility issues experienced by frontline communities. I think that's it for that. Elisa, do you want to do buildings and energy?
Sure. So this section, a lot of the feedback was really about truing up some inconsistencies around the language around net zero carbon versus net zero energy. But there's also kind of expressed concern about the lack of mention about natural gas and some of the kind of considerations that about phasing out natural gas in our community. We also heard fairly clearly that there is a real concern around energy affordability, specifically for communities of color and low-income customers. And I think that's only been exacerbated as some of the relief that happens and just the question marks about what happens when the utilities kind of come back to the stage and the affordability of their product comes into play again. So we are trying to address some of that language, but really as a principle and process, really identify that when we make policy or we move forward on policies, that it's really considering affordability and certainly impact on communities of color and low-income communities. And lastly, I think there was some interest in us trying to stitch together this climate emergency resolution with the 100% renewables resolution and trying to make sure that they both reference each other and if there are any kind of updates that we are able to stitch that back into our climate emergency declaration.
Thanks. So I'll do fossil fuels and then we'll jump back to transportation because there's a couple updates there. So similarly, I mean, folks, as Elisa said, wanted to see this connection between the 100% renewables and the climate action plan. Folks asked kind of more specifics on, what counts as renewable energy here. And so for that, we'll be relying on the 100% renewables for our definitions, kind of as they relate to this climate emergency declaration. And I think we'll do some more clarification either in the document or kind of in our surrounding communications around how those two resolutions talk to each other. And the biggest change is the 100% renewables has a 2035 deadline that we now have updated to a 2030 deadline for the utilities to provide 100% renewable sourced electricity for our community-wide electricity needs. And so I'm again working with the city attorney to see if there's kind of something we need to do to update that in the resolution, or if we can just kind of communicate that really clearly when we have this come to council. A lot of folks, as probably will not come to a surprise to all of you, asked for the declaration to specifically address Zenith and concerns around Zenith Energy and the Critical Energy Hub and kind of other specific projects of concern. We're not going to be calling those out specifically in the declaration. It's not really something we have the ability to do from a legal perspective, but again, in our communications, we're going to be making sure that we're linking, the call out that we have in the current draft of the declaration is general, right? That the council still holds as a high priority the need to prevent any further expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. And we can talk about what that means, but we're not going to be adding a lot more specifics in terms of kind of specific actions here, both because that's still under development and we kind of have a limited ability to call out particular projects, particularly ones that have, permits under review and things like that. So that's, I think, all of our topics.
Amanda, do you want me to run back and do transportation? I totally,
yeah, that'd be great.
I realized I just flipped over that. So really quickly on transportation, a lot of comments related to transportation and particularly additional actions that should be added. But some big themes included just expanding transportation options, especially making transit more accessible, safe, and sustainable. A lot of focus on expanding transit and investing in transit, focusing in areas that are currently underserved. A lot of comments related to fareless transit, bus electrification, and then a lot of comments related to halting the I-5 Rose Quarter Highway expansion. And so there are some specific directive actions that we're looking to include, one related to working with partners to secure free youth transit paths, another one related to congestion pricing, both on freeway mile lanes as well as the city's roadways. And then lastly, action related to updating city code related to EV charging infrastructure in new construction and increasing access to the benefits of affordable electric vehicle, to frontline communities.
Thanks, Michelle. And we'll leave it there. I know that was a lot, so want to leave some time for questions, feedback, reactions. The other kind of bucket of comments that we got were folks just giving general comments to the city, not necessarily specific to, I want to see this in the resolution, but the city should do A, B, C, D to combat climate change. And so we captured those in this document. We've also shared, specifically the transportation ones, shared those with PBOT staff. And that's just a good kind of good crowdsourcing for to hear, what the community's priorities are, what ideas are that can kind of feed into the conversations we'll have after we finalize the declaration.
Well, thank you
I'll
very
turn it
much.
over to you, Eli. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the popcorn style presentation. That worked well. Well, PSC members, I've wanted to talk about this for a while, and it's great to have us even in this forum, but I wanted to open up first so people have comments. I've got Mike and then Katie, and then I'm going to jump in myself, and then we'll see who comes after that. So Mike, please begin.
Yeah, I wasn't actually, until I got your note early this morning, I think, Eli, that we would be in a position to be providing any feedback. I assumed it was just informational. So, but I did, once I understood maybe there was an opportunity to provide some feedback, I did send you and Michelle, staff, and the PSC members some thoughts I put together this morning that really focus primarily on the issues that Michelle brought up. And I would agree with the commenters regarding the almost exclusive focus on mitigation in particular, but also, there was just kind of passing reference to green infrastructure and a number of other issues. And my personal feeling is the whereases are fine, but I'm interested in action, and I would propose, depending on how we go with this, that the comments that I made would be much more appropriate, I think, for the be it resolved.
Okay.
So I thought Michelle did a good job, actually, of articulating what folks were getting at, and I only put together a few comments. Michelle, are we still in line for, at one point we were going to have a presentation that's focused exclusively or specifically on adaptation measures that we're looking at? Is that still coming up to us?
Yeah, it was scheduled actually right before everything sort of went remote and you all kind of went on hiatus a little bit. And so I'll work with Julie and Sandra to see when we can get that rescheduled. But it was back in March that we were supposed to do that, to come talk to you about the adaptation and preparation work. And then I will follow up with the suggestion that you had related to sort of green infrastructure action plan sort of development. And so I'll follow up. I know a lot of work has been happening on that front across multiple bureaus. And so I'll just see if I can get a status update on that and see if there's something there that could be incorporated.
Right. Well, you did mention adding whereases, but again, I would hope we could shift most of that to be resolved.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Katie? Katie Larcel? Are you able to unmute maybe? Okay, well, while Katie's figuring that out. Oh, great.
I think I was anticipating your movement, and so we kept unmuting and muting myself. But I just went through it and kind of notated some of the things that I was interested in. And in your remarks, I couldn't tell whether the things that you were highlighting, were those things that you were going to change for the most part, or were you just kind of highlighting the things that were interesting? Are you going to be
Yeah, we're highlighting both the main themes we saw from the comments, which align fairly closely with the things we are going to change. Yeah. So and we'll have an updated version and kind of a red line version fairly soon. I'm hoping by the end of this week. Although we have just a few more kind of folks to check the wording with bureaus and things like this. But once you have that, there'll be much more clear kind of what the changes were. But I would say the majority of things we are going to be updating kind of based on the strongest themes that came across. A couple constraints where we can't really put more detail, but I think the majority of it we will be able to kind of respond to, which I'm pleased with. Yeah.
Okay, great. And there were number 4 and number 8. I'm like Mike. I'm more interested in to be it further resolved. One of the things that when I was reading through that, and it sounds like you're going to be having a major change that area. You're not necessarily setting up a what did you call it in here?
The governance structure.
Governance structure.
Yeah, governance structure. But one of the things that you should think about is like some of the governance structures that people are coming up with these days, where that are almost like lotteries, where you apply or people get chosen through different mechanisms. Like, if you're a voter, you have a possibility of being chosen for something. And I could see having something like that as part of this, where you would apply and you would have to hit certain demographics or things to make sure. But that way you would end up getting a more a bigger pool of people. And I could see the other one that I read through was the Michigan's redistricting committee. And it's kind of fascinating. I won't go on and on about it, but I also noticed 8 because it was talking about youth being involved in the test. But I think that 4 and 8 are kind of similar in that it's out there as a marker. Obviously, it wouldn't just be youth, right? Because it seems like a pretty big thing. And then also, I'm wondering how you're going to connect with youth with the virus and the schools all shut down. But maybe they won't be shut down forever. Number 10.
I hope not.
Huh?
I hope not.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just have empathy. I don't have to deal with it. But number 10, that was the Anti-Displacement Action Plan. I just wanted to say, I'd like to hear more about that in this body, because we've been talking about this for a long time, and we just heard it was not going to be fully funded. And so I don't want, it bothers me when something gets called out all the time. And that anti-displacement thing's getting called out all the time by the city as kind of a proud thing that they're doing. And yet, I don't think it's being fully funded, and it's taking a long time for it to happen. So I would like to call it out again in a different way here. And then I also wanted to say that I too want natural gas in there. If industry in this state will not allow a cap and trade to be passed in the legislature, then we need to have them be in every one of these kinds of resolutions so that we actually have some action. They have more control over how they pull back if they have a cap and trade. But if they do not have that, then we need to call them out in all of these different public spaces.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, let's see. There was 2 more. Sorry.
I'm gonna have to move us through them quickly if you can.
I will. I'll be fast.
Okay, great.
No, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll jump in, and then Jeff after me. I had 2 main topics on this. One of them, and maybe staff hasn't been here long enough, but I looked through the 2015 document, which had climate action through equity with participation and leadership really from OPAL and APANO and Coalition for Communities of Color. And I'm just having a little disconnect for how that plan is a 20-page document. So much happened in the 2015 plan. Why we're at this point of having challenge with inclusive, with frontline communities, and sort of feeling like we're reinventing that wheel now. So I know that may be more of a question for commissioners who've been around since that time. That predates my time on the commission. But I feel like a little disconnect there. And then an organizational structure, I think that's a big issue for us, because my feeling is that currently the accountability mechanism the city has for climate action lies with the PSC. primarily outside of city council. And we haven't done much on that. We haven't provided that accountability. And frankly, we're not constituted with the diversity and the frontline communities and representation to be the best body for that. So it feels like there's been kind of a gap. And so when I saw the governance structure idea in this packet, I thought, well, maybe that's the way to do it. I think it's important for the city to have active accountability by a nonprofit policy-oriented group, because sometimes that group can pull city council to go further than they otherwise would. So I thought that this project might be a way of achieving that. And if we did that, I'd want to hear from my fellow commissioners. It would take a change to Title 33, because right now we are that body. At least we're not the only one, but we have that. And we would always, of course, inform our planning decisions with climate, as we have been doing. But I wanted to put that on the table for discussion. And I'm going to pass it over. Jeff was, oh, interesting. Oriana's hand is now above Jeff's hand on the order. So I will go with that, and then Jeff after Oriana. So Oriana, please.
I think Jeff was ahead of me, so I will defer there. But then I think I have some direct comments to your question, Eli, about kind of what's changed for frontline communities.
Okay, so I guess Jeff first, and then we'll go back to Oriana.
I just have a quick question. I'm wondering if there's any connection to or possibility of using funds from the Clean Energy Fund. This resolution talks about needing more resources, looking for more resources. So my two-part question: one, is that legally possible? And two, is that something that maybe should be addressed? Because even if it's not possible, I think in a lot of people's minds, that would be a question that would come up. We have this well-funded Clean Energy Fund. Is there any connection between those resources and this action plan?
So I think I can answer that. They are very much related, and but there are very clear restrictions on what that clean energy surcharge can and cannot be used to fund, and that's all detailed in the code and the ballot language that was adopted that defined how that program would be administered and what that funding could be used for. That being said, it is a huge opportunity for us to really implement at a scale a whole variety of climate actions. And so it's definitely going to help the city, help the community, help us all to activate the types of actions and projects that we need to do to reduce carbon emissions at a scale that we have never been able to do it before. That being said, there are restrictions on what that funding can and can't be used for, and funding city staff to work on climate planning sorts of things is not within the purview of what that funding can be used for. But there's a whole slew of great workforce development, energy efficiency, renewable energy, green infrastructure, restorative agriculture types of projects, implementation projects that can be done. And that money flows through community and nonprofits to implement those projects. And so it's a great way to more directly benefit the community through the expenditure of those resources.
Okay, thank you. So we're running short on time for this topic. So let's go to Oriana and then to Mike Halk and then move on to the South Reach. So Oriana.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly jump in as someone who is a member of a community-based organization, and I wasn't here when the Climate Action Plan was initially discussed. But I think that equity work, while really strong and that has propelled us in a positive direction, isn't sufficient to get us where we need in terms of community-led solutions. It's not just about including communities, it's about actually shifting the power, which I think staff from BPS and the mayor's office have really effectively shared in terms of the intentionality around that governance structure. That just bringing folks to the table or consulting is not enough. I'm happy to share around a really great spectrum of engagement from Movement Strategies Center in the Bay Area, who do a lot of community-based and community-led work. And it looks at the spectrum from just kind of tokenizing and involving in a process, but not really giving decision-making power, to giving true decision-making power. And I think that initial climate action plan work sits more in the middle of engaging people and bringing them to the table and seeking their feedback. But it's not the full decision-making power that community wants. Community wants a body that maybe isn't the PSC, but gives them some power over the decisions that affect their communities most significantly. And for communities who are most impacted by climate change, and like Cully, where Verde works, is one example, those community members will never feel well represented by a body like the Planning and Sustainability Commission, even if it were all Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, simply because of the power dynamics that allow someone to get into this space. So creating a new governance structure, I think from our perspective as an organization and from the perspective of community members I've talked to, is really shifting power and not just creating another commission or creating more government, but creating new structures that are accessible. And I'm really interested in Katie's idea about like a lottery or kind of democratic ways for creating access. I think that's more in the spirit of where this is going. So I can understand the tension and the concern and the feelings of, you know, why are we repeating work and why are we also potentially leaving out important bodies like the PSC? And I think this body has a really strong role, especially in upholding elements of the climate action plan. But there's so much more climate work that has to happen in the city, and that I think really needs to be creative and transformational in terms of how that is brought forward and who is making the decisions and in what ways.
Mike?
Yeah, Eli, I was really pleased to see this is governance aside, your observation that it might be we might be well served to have an advisory group or commission or whatever that actually did focus explicitly on climate change and more broadly on natural resources. No one will be surprised, I'm sure, to hear that I would love nothing more than to have an entity that actually did focus in on natural resource issues, and of course climate change would be hugely important in that. So thanks for the opening.
Well, thank you staff for listening to our comments, and look forward to seeing the updated version that heads to City Council.
And I just one addition, I wanted to first of all add my thanks to staff for a great presentation, and Amanda, and also Katie, your suggestion of bringing the anti-displacement conversation to Planning Sustainability Commission. We will have some important milestones of work that will be hitting in June. So we'll look at a July timeframe for doing that and having that discussion so the whole commission can hear more about that work.
Yeah, and I just hope it's getting the support it needs. It's, you know, it kind of bothers. I mean, that was really a little, when I read about it in the further resolves, and then I was thinking, wait a minute, that's been around for a while. And then when you gave your report and you said, well, we asked for more money, that they wouldn't give it to us. It's like, they can't have it both ways. You either do it or you don't. Yeah.
There is strong political support for this work. In fact, the council just in April allocated $180,000 to our community partners, ADPDX, to support them to hire a coordinator to work with us, and also to enable community partners to be at the table and do the work with us. They had to make some choices about what they could allocate given the economic situation and the budget cuts. And we basically told them, I think had we not been able to absorb the work, they would have funded it, but we were clear that we could figure out how to absorb the work. So council's been really, really supportive, and they just raised it again, had a good conversation about it at the budget hearing today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Mike, do you have a last comment? Your hand's still up, or are we ready to go to the South Reach? Okay. I will lower your hand. Thank you. So we're now going to shift gears a little bit to the River Plan South Reach work session. And I think at this point we have to lose Kat if she's on, because she lives in the South Reach and will not be participating in this part of the discussion. Are there any other disclosures people need to make for potential conflicts of interest for this project? Okay, then presenting staff will be Sally Edmonds, Debbie Bischoff, Jeff Caudill, and Mindy Brooks. And we have received various volumes of paper that I'm going to sort of shuffle while I'm looking at the screen here. But I think we'll invite staff to guide us through the process, and I'll hand the reins over right now.
Thank you, Eli. My name is Sally Edmond. I'm the Central City River and Environmental Planning Manager for BPS, and just very happy to be here with you today. With me are Debbie Bischoff, Jeff Caudill, Mindy Brooks, and Cassie Ballou from BPS. And then we have a number of staff from the Bureau of Development Services, Bureau of Environmental Services, and Portland Parks, also on Zoom. So they're here to answer any questions that you might have that they are better suited to answer. So yeah, we're pleased to be here to go through some more amendments to the River Plan South Reach. We were last with you on March 10th. You have a number of materials in your packet, as Eli alluded, and they correspond to the topics we want to discuss with you. So for watershed health and resilience, we have a table and 3 memos that all start with the letter A. For recreation, and Jeff Cottle will be speaking with you about watershed health and resilience. Then for recreation, we have a table and a memo that both start with the letter B, and Debbie Bischoff will help you with that. And then for riverfront communities, urban design, we have table D, a memo, and a draft character statement. And Cassie Blue will help you with that. All of those items start with the letter D. And then finally, I believe that Julie Oken sent you all a memo spelling out some possible motions for you to consider. So that's another way you can track the order that we are following. So as staff present their topics to you, if you could please have that relevant table in front of you so you can follow along, that would be helpful. And then, so for each topic, we'll start by asking you if you want to add any additional items to the list of things that we'll be discussing. And if you don't add items, then we will start by asking you to support the staff recommendation for the items that are not checked for discuss. In some cases, the items that are not checked are amendments, and in other cases, they are a staff recommendation to maintain the proposed draft language. So, yeah, and so once we reach that slide, we'll just turn it back over to you, Eli.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That sounds good.
Great. Okay, so let's turn it over to Jeff Cottle.
Hello. Thanks for having me and having us. So yeah, my name is Jeff Cottle with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'm going to share my screen just with our presentation and go through some items, and we'll pull down the presentation where we have discussions. And hopefully this will work out okay. So yeah, the first topic we want to discuss is watershed health and resilience. So as Sally mentioned, that's in Table A. So there are 4 items that have been identified for further discussion in your table. That's related to the setback, the Willing Seller program, some proposals related to enforcement, and then a bit on the future of Ross Island. Related to the other items, starting below the double line in your table A, so it's the first one is A24. Were there any other items that people wanted to discuss today? Okay, sounds like no. Okay, so this is in terms of the straw poll was just our items that we don't have identified for further discussion. There's an amendment to the Ross Island restoration and putting that, updating the document to identify that as a potential for a future Water Resources Development Act package. Commissioner Haug had requested that it be included in the city does have a current Water Resources Development Act package that's at Congress right now, so it can't be added to that, but the amendment is to, in the future, look at trying to initiate a separate package, and it's apparently a rather lengthy and involved process, but having Ross Island and the restoration of Ross Island as a part of that process, as a future package. And then the other items are A4, A8, A19, and A24, which are just affirming the existing proposed draft language. So we have these motions for you to consider, and I'll just turn it over to you, Chair Spivak, just for these items.
Okay, would someone like to make one of these motions immediately in front of us? People are being shy. Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I know. Are we taking one by one or the whole set?
I think in this case, we would be looking to do them as a whole, unless there's further discussion that you would like to do. You would like to, if you do want to discuss anything.
Request to do discussion on A4. I would at least like to discuss that one.
Okay.
So,
and so should we do it amongst the others, or do you want to talk briefly about it? We didn't prepare, we don't have any slides with that, but I can give you the basics of that.
Okay. Well, I was.
You can move all of this aside from A4 and pull that and discuss that later if that helps.
Yeah, I think that would be that's probably my preferred approach.
Okay.
Mike, I think you mentioned A4 as well in your comments. This is the
I did. I don't support it, but I really don't think it's significant enough an issue to take a lot of time to go over personally. I've objected to it, throughout the South Reach process, but it doesn't rise to the level that we've got a lot of stuff to cover today. So I'm happy to go with it or not.
Okay, I was actually going to bring my own concern on that one, just to clear it, is that, I mean, setbacks and all the other code updates, do they really mean setback? Like in a mixed use zone or a single family house, how close you can be to a street or another property line? So I actually think setback kind of means that's how close the thing can be to the thing it's set back from. And if you have an ability to trade, it basically means the setback's 45 feet instead of 50 feet. So that was my instinctive reaction to this. So I'm curious if staff has a thought on that. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I will.
Your concern is the same as mine, so.
Yeah, I will start. I mean, I guess one thing to note is that you are allowed up to 5 feet of encroachment, but you do need to add an additional area of setback for any encroachment that you do have into the setback. It basically, you have a wider setback to offset whatever the area is that has been encroached upon. I think for this, I will defer a little bit to maybe have Mindy Brooks, who is here with me, because this is largely a result of discussions that were part of the Central City project. And we're in this middle area where the code has been remanded for the Central City, but it will be adopted before we get to City Council. So we will be making updates to existing code, although it's technically not existing right now. But those discussions were part of the development of the Central City. The code updates as a part of Central City 2035. And so, Mindy, I don't know if you want to provide some additional feedback.
On the way to Mindy, I just want to volunteer that, like, if you have a building that has to be set back 5 feet, you don't get to put some of the building 2 feet away and other parts of the building 7 feet away. You don't get to do that kind of trade-off in other setback situations. So just anyway. So Mindy, yes, please jump in.
Yeah, so this was part of Central City 2035, and we actually had significant discussion about different approaches since for Central City, we are expanding the setback from 25 feet to 50 feet. And there are a lot of difficult sites to develop out, not a lot, there are a few difficult sites to build out in the Central City. And so we talked about different approaches. Setback averaging was an approach that was discussed. We felt that a 5-foot encroachment standard was easier to implement with just an offset somewhere else on site. And so we did look at different building footprints in the Central City where you would have a 5-foot encroachment over the entire distance of that building, and then you would add more space adjacent to and contiguous to the setback, primarily on the edges of your site or in the center of the site, depending on where your public space was going to be. And that is what we would be applying then down to the South Reach. I want to also point out that this area in both the Central City and the South Reach would still remain within the New River Environmental Overlay Zone. So along with an equal offset that's required when you encroach by 5 feet, you're also required to do the 1.51 to 1 mitigation requirement with it too. So there is a built-in deterrent for doing it because you'll have additional mitigation required.
Understood. Mike?
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make a motion that we move adoption of A26, A8, A19, and A24, and then do a separate vote on the setback one. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second from Ben, okay. Julie, can you call a vote?
Sorry, give me 1 second. Backrack,
Yes.
Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcel,
Yes.
Manera,
Yes.
Rouse,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries unanimously. And I guess I will put a motion out there for to support A4 with the, to not support staff's recommendation on A4, but to make the 5-foot setback. You can't do an encroachment of 5 feet into the setback.
Second.
Second for Mike. Any discussion?
Can I just make a point that if you do that, you're going to bring the central city back into the conversation because this will impact all the riverfront properties within the central city.
Fair
And
point.
I guess the question is, Eli, do you want it to, I guess there is a way we could work through some of the code over before our next meeting to specifically say it's not applicable in the South Reach, or if you would like it to be both central and south, that's an option too. It's obviously up to you.
Okay. Well, I get that complexity that is intertwining the central city with the rest of the reach. So I would be supportive of that kind of direction. So I guess I would say that a supportive, friendly amendment to this motion would be to say that ask staff to come back with language which removes the allowance for encroachment into 5-foot setback outside the central city. Is that something staff could bring back to us? Okay. Mike, would that be consistent with your second?
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion of that modified motion? I see Ben's hand up. Do you want to discuss?
Just to clarify, I found staff's explanation of the reason why they made this proposal, or they rejected the proposal, Mike's proposal, satisfactory. So I'm actually quite happy with the way it is that's written.
Okay. Thanks.
I just want to hear it again. I didn't quite absorb it. What the motion is that we're voting on.
Thank you. The motion is to currently in the proposed draft, there's an allowance to encroach 5 feet into the setback, as long as you provide an offsetting additional setback in some other area of the site. And staff can be more detailed if you want. And the motion I've put on the table is to remove the allowance to encroach into the 5-foot setback, so encroach 5 feet into the setback outside of the central city to avoid entanglements with the central city plan. So you would no longer be able, you would not be able to encroach into the setback, whatever that, whether it's 50 feet, 25 feet, whatever it is. Is that right, Jeff? Okay, so did that help, Katie?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I just need to hear it again.
Any more discussion on this item? All right, Julie, roll call, please.
Okay. Sure. Backrack,
I'm going to vote no, and just briefly, one, I agree with staff, and two, I hate, unless there's a really good reason, creating these exceptions in the code where it's this if you're there, but it's that if you're somewhere else. And I think wherever we can just maintain consistency, that's a good thing. So I'm sorry, Eli, I'm going to vote against you. No.
all right, thank you. Bortolazzo.
Same here. I'll vote no, and simple reason is it seems like to me that there is enough deterrent, as staff explained and reiterated, to not do this, and at the same time, there's mitigation measures in place that would, theoretically mitigate any impact, and it's a relatively small impact, 5 feet. So it gives you the flexibility that perhaps is needed in some specific cases without, in my opinion, generating, other undesired effects.
Additional. Okay. Thanks. Hauk.
Well, I hadn't intended to bring it up really, but I did. I'm going to say yes.
Larcel.
I'm gonna say no.
Magna,
Yes.
Routh,
No, for the reasons been mentioned.
Smith,
No.
and Spivak.
I will vote with the minority, yes. Saying a setback,
All
setback. All right, so that fails 5-3. And thank you for the discussion. It's good to have a real discussion. Let's move on. So this would be river setback number 2, am I correct?
Yes. So hold on just one second.
And I guess just to summarizing that, I believe the outcome of this is that staff brings back A4 as they proposed. No change to the plan.
That's right. Having a little bit of difficulty with the combination of sharing and trying to get the full screen here, but let me share. So the next item, let's see, I'm not sure I can move them forward. We'll try to give it a go. So the next item is the potential expansion of the river setback. So just a quick reminder on the current situation with the river setback. There are two situations. There's 35 tax lots, riverfront tax lots that have currently already have a 50-foot setback. That's a result of being in the water quality overlay zone. It's also called the Q overlay. And then there are 70 tax lots that have a 25-foot setback today. Quickly, some testimony highlights that we heard that people wanted to, both from the commission, from commissioners and as well as stakeholders, expand the river setback to 100 feet. Incorporate mechanisms to move development out of the setback to the extent possible over time. And so we share that concern that are expressed by stakeholders and commissioners, and we have evaluated a variety of options to limit the impacts of future riverfront development. And again, I forgot to mention that our analysis is covered in memo A22 and has a little bit more detail for you. But so as we were evaluating our recommendations, staff aimed to, number one, ensure mitigation for development impacts to achieve habitat improvements over time. We recognize this as a key area, an important area for habitat, both upland and river habitat. But we also wanted to make sure that we allow for operations, maintenance, and improvements of existing development within the existing footprint, at least for existing development. And then to the extent possible, minimize the number of lots with significant development constraints while still achieving the other goals. And so through our evaluation, we came up with this suite of we still maintain these three items that we think will get to the goals that have been expressed by stakeholders and by the commission. Number one, maintain the 50-foot setback, because as a reminder, the river setback, there's essentially no development other than river-dependent, river-related allowed in the river setback. And so for residential properties, that means that essentially there's no development that's allowed in that area other than you might be able to build a dock or that sort of thing. So in addition, maintain and keep the riparian buffer area, which is we've discussed in our previous sessions, is an area within the floodplain 170 feet from ordinary high water where we would establish a requirement to go where beneficial gain would be necessary to be shown. And that goes beyond just mitigating your impacts, but also showing improvement in floodplain related habitat function, or floodplain related functions. And then finally, what we're proposing is the amendment here is the application of the river environmental to all areas within 100 feet of the top of bank. So the area that we're talking about and that was proposed for setback we would make sure that the river environmental was applied to all of that area. And so that would result in an additional 16 acres of land that would be in the river environmental. And so you wouldn't have to achieve the beneficial gain that is a part of within the riparian buffer area, but would still need to mitigate all development impacts and would a mitigation ratio of at least 1.5 to 1, which is what is in the existing code or within the river environmental code, would be achieved as a mitigation requirement for the river environmental. In addition to these areas, all of the other areas outside of this 100 feet would still be covered with, would be where the river environmental was applied. So all the floodplain, all the high and medium ranked riparian resources that go beyond this area, and then all of our special habitat areas. So just to show you, you have this in the memo A22, this map, but I wanted to show for everyone to see. The purple areas are the areas. So this is the northern portion of our study area. The purple areas are the areas that would be where new river environmental would be applied. And that's these two maps make up that 16 acres additional that would be protected by the river environmental zone. So with that, we have we've prepared a few motions associated with this, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Spivak for discussion.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for staff or discussion for members? Or a motion? Well, staff, I'm afraid we don't have any motions on this one, so we're gonna, no, I think we should probably get somebody. Katie, would you have a?
I'm trying to get my hand up, but I can't.
We're discovering the situation where there's too many things to put on the screen at once.
Yeah, I was struggling just to get my hand up. I just
have them printed off, so if we need that, I can provide that. Katie, what? Yeah.
I looked at that. I looked at that. It sounds reasonable. I kind of wanted to challenge staff to just talk a little more about what the difference between that 100-foot setback and that river environmental would mean. You know, I mean, how do you see it? And then I oftentimes what I'm trying to, I sometimes struggle with some of these things, and I think, well, what's the worst that could happen? And then how likely is it that the worst will happen? Those are two questions that I'm always kind of interested in. So could you just talk about what the difference would be between making, I mean, you kind of detailed, like with the 100-foot thing, you're saying that some people would, with their land, they would be very severely restricted on building on it. Is that the main objection?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is so like I said, with the river setback, if we were to do 100 feet, and there's a table in the memo that breaks down both undeveloped and developed parcels, tax lots. So with the expansion of the river setback, those areas would essentially, you would still be able to have a structure there, and you could continue to do the same things, maintain and operate, but you would be very limited in what other things you could do on the site. And so the difference between the two is, and that's why there's these three different levels of sort of how strict the requirements are. Setback, you pretty much won't be able to do anything unless you do have a river-dependent, river-related development or use there. The riparian buffer area would require mitigation, but at a higher level because of the value of the floodplain and because of the requirements that are, the determination of the biological opinion related to floodplains. And then you can still build the differences, say, for example, between a setback and the river environmental. You can build in the river environmental, you just have to mitigate. It does not prevent development in that area. And so we would just be ensuring that we're getting adequate mitigation in these different, between the riparian buffer area and the river environmental in the 100 feet to make sure that we're seeing improvement over time, but it wouldn't be that the area beyond between the 50 and 100 foot 50-foot setback, and if you extend it to 100 would be undevelopable. There would be difficulty in developing it if not.
So you were pretty excited about the addition of the words beneficial gain, and I was just wondering what does that mean? Does that mean something to you, staff? And I doesn't mean that to me because I don't know what it means. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So beneficial gain is essentially where there is an expectation. And so the way that we evaluate development impacts is you look at what resources are impacted and what functions are the actual habitat functions that are impacted by your proposal. And beyond the river environmental is the structured to ensure basically a no net loss. So the mitigation is aimed to simply offset kind of 1-to-1 your impacts with mitigation. The beneficial gain requires, and because it's connected to the determinations by the National Marine Fisheries Service and the biological opinion for the floodplains, part of the National Flood Insurance Program biological opinion, that's specifically the way we've written it is to specifically achieve improvement in habitat functions. It goes beyond no net loss. You would be expected to, you have to demonstrate improvement in these key floodplain functions. So we have 3 different habitat functions that are relevant to and related to, how floodplains would work. And so for that area, you would be seeing improvement. You would see a significant improvement. You have to show significant improvement in those functions. Whereas with river environmental, it's more of you're just balancing kind of 1-to-1.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike?
Yeah, I've got 2 points. One, I think one of the main, can you hear me? Am I muted? Okay. The main concern that I understand from talking to staff is there'd be non-conforming uses and the potential for takings, legal action on takings, as I recall. Those were 2 significant concerns I thought staff had. And the second one, and I've asked this question before, suggesting that why is it not possible to apply the 100-foot setback everywhere, with the exception of areas where you're going to get into the potential takings? What was the staff thinking on that?
I'll let staff weigh in, but I think there's something about arbitrariness be creating its own legal complexity.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that we have dealt with is, what are the criteria? What is the percent? How much of a parcel do we determine is then enough to basically remove those regulations? There's a separate state requirement in terms of there could be some other action related to reduce property values, that sort of thing beyond just take. And so we'd have to really look at a lot of different considerations if we're going to have that drive our decisions. We're trying not to have that drive our decisions. It's just something that we considered. Looks like maybe Sally has something to add to.
The only other thing I wanted to say is that we don't normally map the setback. We map the river environmental overlay zones. So if we were going to have a 100-foot setback here and a 75 foot setback here and a 50 there, we would have to start mapping the setback all over. So there's a practical consideration as well.
Thanks. Katie, is your hand still up or a new question? Okay, well, since I have it in front of me, I will make the motion, and I'm happy to continue doing this since I can. So I would move to amend volume 1 and 3 of the proposed draft consistent with the following. A22B, apply the River E to all areas within 100 feet of the top of bank. And I move to affirm the proposed draft items A22A for the river setback and A22C for the riparian buffer area. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Steph. Any discussion? All right, then Julie, please lead us in a vote.
Okay, Bachrach.
Yes.
Bortolazzo.
Yes.
Hauk.
Yes. Reluctantly.
Larcel.
Yes.
You all sound very enthusiastic. Magnera.
Yes. Was that enthusiastic?
Thank you. Ralph.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
And my daughter brought me over these glasses to say yes with. Motion passes, and we'll move next to the Willing Seller Program.
Okay, so the next item, and to be completely frank, we had hoped this was we're still working on this, and that's so one of the things that we have come to is a little bit different than what was in Table A, because we had further conversations related to this with BES. But I'll go ahead and give you so the existing situation is that the Willamette River properties are evaluated by what is called the Watershed Land Acquisition Program. It's a similar program to a dedicated program that is the Willing Seller Program for Johnson Creek. And so right now, the Willamette River properties are within the citywide evaluation. There's no specific determinations or priorities for the Willamette River, although BES has already identified key areas in of the Willamette that are target areas for the WLAP, but it all comes from the same, roughly what is now a $1.5 million annual budget. So it's not a whole lot of money when you're talking about acquiring properties. And so generally BES is just sort of opportunistic about where these purchases and where these purchases might be located. Testimony was, excuse me, specifically just we should have a Willamette River, excuse me, specific Willing Seller Program. And so we looked into this. We were hoping, and I think there's still a potential for this. Sorry, one more time. What we have right now in the proposed draft is investigate the development of a program for Willamette River, and there is interest by BES to establish such a program that would be a Willamette specific program, but because of limits on how they can spend their ratepayer funds, they would not be able to commit to funding such a dedicated Willing Seller Program for the Willamette. Involvement of maybe another alternative is the involvement of multiple bureaus too, where this program could address or specifically be focused on environmental concerns as well as hazards. So maybe something like the Bureau of Emergency Management and that sort of thing when we're talking about climate change and future flood risk. That such a program may involve more than just BES to make it work. Caitlin Lovell is here from BES if you have any additional questions about this, but what we are proposing or recommending is to still continue, and there is some work going on that could potentially develop some alternatives for ways to get this done. But right now it's the commitment to specifically develop a program. We would like to just say that we're continuing to investigate it.
Any questions? I have the motion. I will move to affirm the proposed draft item that would investigate a Willing Seller Program rather than commit to develop one. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, thank you. Was that Ben?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Okay. Any discussion? All right, Julie, you have it.
Keep unmuting myself. I'm sorry. Back.
Yes.
Bortolazzo.
Yes.
Hauk.
Yeah.
Larcel.
Yes.
Magnera.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes. Motion passes. So now enforcement, Jeff?
Okay.
Yeah, with this one,
Thank
I'll
you,
pass
folks
it
here.
to you.
I'm gonna I'll be presenting on enforcement. Jeff will pull up the presentation here. We're going to be working from table A, item A10. There's also a memo A10 as well for you to refer to. Excuse me. So today in the existing Greenway Code, removal of any trees except nuisance species requires a full Greenway review. There are no exemptions or standards in the existing Greenway Code today. The proposed draft is modeled after the environmental overlay zone that's applied throughout the rest of Portland and has exemptions for removal of nuisance trees, as well as dead, dying, and dangerous trees and trees within 10 feet of structures. The proposed draft also has standards for tree removal in specific circumstances. And whenever trees are removed, replacement is required. Next slide. We heard testimony that when people remove trees and vegetation along the Willamette River without going through a review as is required today, enforcement has been ineffective to ensure tree replacement. We also heard that a 1-year monitoring period is not sufficient to ensure that replaced trees get established. Staff met with Bureau of Development Services and Bureau of Environmental Services to discuss the violations and enforcement process and brainstorm the best ways to address the concerns. Next slide. The first recommendation is to remove any exemptions for tree removal within the river setback and the riparian buffer area. Removal of nuisance trees, dead, dying, or dangerous trees, and trees within 10 feet of structures would move to a standard in the code. That means property owners would need to go to Bureau of Development Services to do a plan check to show they are meeting the standard. The second recommendation is for the Bureaus of Planning and Sustainability, Development Services, and Environmental Services to work at looking at a permitting process for the tree removal standards and look for ways to make it simple and fast. And the final recommendation is to extend the monitoring period to 3 years. It should be noted that this might require additional BDS resources to track permits through the monitoring period. Next slide. And we've prepared some motions for you to consider. So I'll turn it back over to Chair Spivak.
You caught me snacking. Are there any questions on this? I know I have one. I'll let Mike start up and then I'll jump in.
Well, I have some comments. I'm going to support all three of these, but I would like to point out, and I've shared this with staff and with the commissioners. There's information in the staff memo that I find really problematic. The first one being referring to watchdog groups or individuals as, quote, targeting people who have been cutting trees. I find that a pretty objectionable term, targeting. People aren't targeting anyone or any homeowners association. They are being diligent in reporting violations. And I think it's a very different matter that folks are actually good citizens keeping an eye out for what's going on in the river. I actually do not find it difficult to identify the species that are out there. It's pretty simple, actually. So I question that. And the access, at least where the most egregious violations are occurring, are on the Greenway. So there's absolute access. It's not access everywhere in the South Reach, but there is access from the river as well. And then it's stated that the problems about repeat violations are not an issue. Well, we had testimony from the Homeowners Association essentially bragging that every year, which they do, they go out and cut all the trees. So there were just some statements in the report that I found contrary to what my experience and other people's experience on violations. It's a huge issue. All that being said, I do support the amendments.
Thank you. I have a question for, at the 3-year point, which I appreciate the extension, what is the stick if someone was not complying at 3 years? I mean, it's not a bonded improvement. What can the city do?
I'm actually going to ask either Mike Leafield or Stephanie Beckman from Bureau of Development Services to respond to that because they deal with that and would know the process better than I would.
Welcome, thank you. might need to unmute. I can't actually see you on my screen yet.
Hi, this is Mike Liefeld. I'm with the Bureau of Development Services. I manage our zoning enforcement program. I'm not sure if Stephanie wants to jump in. Essentially, if there's a requirement that they supply the proper monitoring report at any time period, if we track that or receive a complaint that that hasn't happened, if that hasn't been met, then they would be found to be in violation of that city code and subject to monthly code enforcement penalties until they supply the proper report. And if that proper report did not confirm that all the vegetation had survived as required, then they would be required to replant to gain compliance with the requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is Stephanie Beckman. I'm with the Land Use Services Group. So I would respond that the question you're asking is one of the issues that we have struggled with for a long time. And so we have talked with BPS about, this making it longer doesn't necessarily, where it might get to, are the plants surviving, doesn't really get to the issue of how do we track and enforce on this. So, we will need to have some internal discussions about what's the best way to do that. Is there something we can put in our permitting system that automatically triggers a follow-up? Otherwise it takes staff manually tracking and following up with individual property owners. I don't think we want to go the route of getting a bond because that seems a little bit overkill, but that's how we do it on larger projects where we need to have someone maintain. That's probably the easiest thing for the city because then we don't have to, they come to us to ask us to release it as opposed to us going to them and asking them to come prove it. So it is an issue and it's something that we'll need to work on. It's been a problem in environmental zones too, where we have the same issue of following up and tracking. So.
Thank you, and thanks for being on the call.
Sure.
Mike, do you have your hand up again?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I was going to
make back to Jeff.
Yeah, I'd like clarification on, I believe I know the answer, but I'd like the PSC to know as well. On A10A, it says, removal of other non-native vegetation like black Himalayan blackberries and so forth within the river setback would remain exempt as proposed. The big concern, of course, and this again is something that occurs annually, all of the Himalayan blackberries are cut, but there's no replanting of native species. That's occurred year after year. And my understanding of this proposal is that, in fact, if those plants are removed, that replanting is in fact required. Is that correct?
Yes, it is required. So the exemption for removal of non-native invasive species within that area does carry a requirement that the area be replanted. And there are requirements in the code as to what that native replanting density needs to look like. And so if it did not occur, then that would also fall underneath of enforcement and violation.
Thanks. Jeff?
I just wanted to make a quick note that, and then Stephanie alluded to it. So the logistics, the specifics of exactly how some of these things, these are kind of concepts right now. And in terms of how we need to do a little bit more conversation about exactly how the process will work. And we'll come back with code on May 26th. And I think we're hoping to have some code related to that, exactly how it would specifically look, and you know more. We can talk a little bit more about exactly how these follow-up pieces would work and that sort of thing.
Thanks for the reminder. And for all of these we're discussing, many we don't have actual code yet, so staff gets a chance to write that up. Oriana.
So I just want to clarify with you, Mike, where the concern is coming in here on the enforcement side. Is it mostly that there's not good enforcement in terms of replanting with native species, or is there also concern that the enforcement isn't happening sufficiently on the removal side as well?
as far as I'm concerned, and other people who have been following this issue, both of those are issues.
Okay. I will make a motion to I will move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following: A10A, removing the exemptions; A10B, action to explore permitting process; and A10C, extending the monitoring period to 3 years. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mike. Discussion? All right, Julie, time to unmute.
Okay, Backrack.
Quick comment, because I almost always follow Commissioner Houck's lead on anything to do with environmental matters. And I am going to go ahead and vote yes, but I have to take exception with one thing you said, Mike, which is that it's easy to identify the tree species. Well, for you, Mike, I'm sure it is. For your average walker, hiker in Oregon, it's not that easy, or homeowner. But anyway, I vote yes.
Okay, Bortolazzo.
Yes.
Houck.
I am going to vote yes, but contingent, of course, on May 26th, we actually have language that affects this stuff. So yes.
Purcell.
Yes.
Magnera.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes, motion passes unanimously, and I will give a brief plug for iNaturalist on your phone, which my 10-year-old daughter can take a picture of anything and it will tell her quite accurately what the species is. It's free.
I don't know. I've got one of those for flowers and it doesn't work that well. So
I'll send you offline another one. Ross Island, I think, is next, as requested by Commissioner Houck to discuss that 825.
Yeah, so this is the final item in watershed health and resilience, and we can move on to recreation. We don't have a motion related to this, but we just want to, and we can, I'm looking forward to the discussion here. So just a little background on the existing situation. So as many of you know, Parks and Rec, the Portland Parks and Recreation owns roughly, I think, maybe 40% of Ross Island, which is really Ross Island and Hardtack Island. Hardtack is on the east side. They were connected back in 1926. And Ross Island and Santa Gravel owns what is Hardtack, and I think they technically own Toe and East Island. The Ross Island Santa Gravel is still operating. They still are processing material on the island on what once was Hardtack Island. And based on our discussions with them, oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't mention you have a memo, which is memo 825, which just provides what we know about kind of plans for Ross Island in terms of just these couple of entities that we know that where things are happening. But so Ross Island Santa Gravel expects, as far as when we've met with them, I think 3 or 4 times through this process, they still expect to continue their operations there. They don't have any plans as far as we know to stop operations there. And then also as a result of some investigation and looking through the Department of Environmental Quality, and then also with the harmful algal blooms in the Ross Island Lagoon, there's been sort of heightened interest in Ross Island and the complex issues and regulatory structure that's there. So kind of through these various things, there was a connection that was made to the State of Oregon Regional Solutions team, and they had a few meetings with stakeholders back at the end of last year and I think beginning of this year. And they did complete a preliminary assessment. It was apparently a little bit abbreviated, I think maybe because of COVID-19 or for whatever reason. But so they completed an evaluation to assess a potential future Ross Island focused project. And we can talk about specifically what happened. So the request was just, what are the future plans? You can, in terms of the city's future plans and the River Plan Southreach, what's in there, we have our urban design concept, which shows the future of Ross Island as well. But also, so we are not proposing anything right now. We're waiting the finalization of that assessment that was done by this regional solutions team to understand what they might be doing for the future in terms of developing potentially a new vision for Ross Island. As many of you know, Ross Island Sand and Gravel are currently still in the process of meeting the requirements of a reclamation plan that's been in place for quite some time. And although they have done a lot of work there, they still are quite a ways from reaching the endpoints, the goals of that reclamation plan. So they still have significant commitment for Ross Island moving forward. So I'll open up to discussion from there.
Thank you. Mike, do you have a question or discussion?
I have a comment. I actually met with the Oregon Solutions folks recently. They asked me to come in and chat about so they'd understood more about the history of Ross Island. And if anybody gets the sense that I am personally pretty frustrated with what's going on out there, I go back to my first hearing before City Council in 1979. So that's how long I've been tracking this issue. And they're way behind their obligations as far as restoration. The term that the two Oregon Solutions folks gave me once we finished our conversation was, it's a Gordian knot. And that's an understatement. So I think we do have in the South Reach a recommendation to create a management plan for Ross Island, Holgate Channel, and Oaks Bottom. I think that's going to probably have to come from the city realistically. And I don't know, I cannot recall where a request to put acquisition of Ross Island into the South Reach plan, if that actually survived all of this work or not. But I'm definitely talking to Metro about the regional bond measure, taking a look at acquisition, because I think the only way we're going to really deal with Ross Island in a holistic, ecological, sensible way is with public ownership. So that's all I have to add.
Okay, thank you.
And I can add just a little bit. So Mike, in terms of those changes, that'll be in, we agree with you in the language that you provided specific language. So that'll also be covered in the May 26th, just sort of specific details of changes to the plan and to the code.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess I was curious, it may be too early, but apparently the draft is out. I guess, Jeff, have you seen the draft from Oregon Solutions team? And if they've got any solutions to the algae bloom issue? If you do, I'd be curious for a 30-second version. Otherwise, we'll wait till June.
Well, I haven't heard that is out. I don't know if Mike would probably be maybe potentially more aware of that. So the thing is, the difference is the regional solutions team, the harmful algal blooms is one part of it, but if it's a project that they undertake, it's really, that's one piece, but it's a broader look at, there's all these different entities that are involved in Ross Island, and how can we better work together to determine what the future of Ross Island is going to be.
Got it.
Yeah, I think on the harmful algal blooms, there's been some work from a professor from Oregon State University that identified some solutions, and that's still, I think, kind of moving forward, but determining who's going to shepherd that.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I'll just say that with the Oregon Solutions folks agree that the algal blooms cannot be addressed independently of all the other ecological and public use issues out there. So it's got to be holistic. It has to be much broader than the algal blooms.
Okay, thanks. All right, we've made it through A. Let's shift now to B, recreation. And Sally, I'm not sure who's leading this one, but I'll do the handoff.
Debbie Bischoff.
Oh, Debbie, okay.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Debbie Bischoff, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We have in the recreation realm 3 topics to cover today. You have a table B continued and a memo B. I will highlight the testimony and provide staff recommendations for your consideration. Before I begin, in table B, there are 3 items marked for no discussion. They are items B13 through 15, and I'm curious to know if any commissioners would like to discuss those items.
Not hearing any comment, I think we can assume that the commission is okay with those items, and we'll hand it back to staff.
Okay. So Jeff, the next slide, please. Oh, do I have control? Thank you. No, we got to go back one. Sorry. There we go. Here's the motion for your consideration. I do want to note that on item B15 has a new action R3G, and there was a typo. It says in your table 6 to 10 years, but our time frame in our actions is 6 to 20 years. So I just want that corrected with this motion. Thank you.
So I will move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following. B13 to B15 with the following typo correction for B15, new action R3G, where the time frame changes from 6, it will now become 6 to 20 years. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second from Mike. Any discussion? Then let's take a vote.
Bachrach?
Yes, and Julie, I've been trying to message you. I need to leave the hearing, so thank you all. My last vote of the day.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Bortolazzo?
Yes.
Hauk?
Yes.
Larcel?
Yes.
Manera?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Spivak?
Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is parks enforcement. At the March 10th work session, Commissioner McNamara raised concerns about equity in parks enforcement of rules on its properties. The concern is that homeless individuals and communities of color may not be treated equitably when it comes to enforcement of rules. Staff worked with Portland Parks and Rec and offer an amendment to action R1H to provide internal parks staff education and training around equity and to track enforcement of park rules to ensure equitable enforcement of these rules.
Great. Are there any questions or discussion?
Next slide, Jeff, please. And here is a motion for your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions? You guys want me to keep doing the motions, or would someone else like to jump in? Since it's not on the
Also move.
Steph so moves. Do you want to put back on the screen what it is, and that way Steph can tell us? It's going to be hard.
The memo. Yep. Thank you for the notes. Yeah, I will move to amend volume 1 to be consistent with the following. B4 to revise action R1H to include the proposed text about Portland Parks and Rec staff equity training and tracking enforcement to ensure equitable enforcement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oriana seconds. Let's do a vote.
Bortolazzo?
Yes.
Hauk?
Yes.
Larcel?
Yes.
Manera?
Yes, and I just want to thank staff for their responsiveness and hard work on this.
Thank you.
Ralph?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Spivak?
Yes. Motion passes.
Great, we'll move on to the next item. The next two items are about trails. At the last, the March 10th work session, Commissioner Hauk asked that staff return with responses to the trail-related testimony from the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust, which Commissioner Hauk supported. Staff coordinated with park staff, Commissioner Hauk, and Jim Shulin, who's a testifier on behalf of the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust. Staff came up with a couple of action item changes based on these conversations. Jim Shulin reviewed Table B with Planning and Park staff last week, and he is fine with all of staff's responses and recommendations. We did discuss some related items that are beyond the scope of this project at this time and offered Jim some follow-up guidance. For B10, the key change is to action R3C to mention meeting typical regional multi-use path design standards when making improvement to Willamette Greenway trails, including the Springwater corridor.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
So the motion is on the next slide for your consideration. Thank you.
Right. Well, I will make a motion for item B10 to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following, to revise action R3C, to include proposed text that mentions meeting typical regional multi-use path design guidelines when making trail improvements.
Second.
Second.
Thank you from Chris. Any discussion? All right, Julie, let's vote.
Okay, Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcel,
Yes.
Manera,
Yes.
Rouse,
A fervent yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes, motion passes.
Great. So our second trail item is about a macadam dual trail system. And it's B12 in your table B. This was also brought up by the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust and Commissioner Hauk. Given the congestion on the Willamette Greenway Trail through the Johns Landing area, this testimony asked for construction of a paved trail within or adjacent to the trolley alignment. In the existing plan, action C5C, it seeks to address Willamette Greenway Trail conflicts and congestion by looking for an alternative north-south connection in the macadam corridor area. Parks and Rec staff notes that the trolley alignment may not be wide enough to have a rail width trail in it. But there are also, I just want to point out, a couple of other plan actions that seek to improve pedestrian and bike access and safety in the macadam area, and in the future planning and construction of a trolley streetcar extension from South Waterfront to Lake Oswego. All of these actions work toward achieving a more multimodal opportunities on the west side of the river. Staff recommends a minor clarifying amendment to C5C to have alternative north-south bike connection within the macadam corridor area. So the next slide has a motion for your consideration.
Okay, a question from Chris.
Yeah, has this been vetted with the consortium that runs the trolley?
So the action that we have in the plan today is what is in the transportation system plan. And so, you know, when we started this planning process, we did check in with Metro and TriMet and all the different agencies on it. And so we believe that our, our recommendation in general for the extension of the streetcar is consistent with the consortium. And certainly any action that would be implemented would involve a community planning process and would involve all the agencies. And likely this would happen when the streetcar planning for that extension was going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, I will move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following. B12, revise action C5C to include proposed text that looks at an alternative north-south trail in the macadam corridor area.
Second.
Thank you, Ben. Any discussion? Julie, let's vote.
Okay, Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcel,
Yes.
Manera,
Yes.
Rouse,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes. Motion carries.
Okay, so our last our last recreation topic for today is about residential docks. We heard from Commissioner Hauk on the need to limit the number and extent of docks in South Reach. Bureau of Development Services staff asked that we clarify review and approval of docks. And the Bureau of Environmental Services, along with Commissioner Hauk in Planning, wants to reduce the adverse impacts of docks on threatened and endangered species and their habitats over time. Next slide, please. Memo B11 in your packet contains a brief issue summary, analysis, and staff recommendations that are included. The recommendations are in Table B. The upshot of the memo is that there's a preponderance of privately owned and used residential docks in the South Reach. 31 out of 47 docks are located south of the Selwood Bridge in the Riverdale-Dunthorpe area. These overwater structures can adversely impact threatened and endangered fish and their habitat, and can also reduce the river area for public recreation use and can add to river recreation congestion. Staff's analysis also showed that there are only 7 remaining residential sites with where additional new docks could be proposed. Planning staff, in discussions with the Bureau of Development Services and Bureau of Environmental Services, think that there's an opportunity to address the impacts of existing docks when significant repairs are made. Major repairs could be considered replacement and made subject to river review and residential dock development standard. Since the replacement of existing docks may happen in the shallow water habitat area, if no alternative design is possible, staff is proposing a new option for mitigation of impacts if it can't be met on site at the time of a project approval for a dock. Next slide, please. So staff has 4 recommendations to the proposed draft. The first one is that the dock development standard be revised to include significantly improved docks, as well as using the code's exemption language for normal repair and maintenance under the River Environmental Overlay Zone. Next slide, please. Staff also recommends a new fee in lieu program until a mitigation bank becomes available. This fee in lieu would allow an applicant who can't mitigate for all impacts on site to contribute to a fund that would help 1 or more restoration projects in the South Reach. City bureaus are working to develop this program and have earmarked Parks and Rec Shallow Water Habitat Restoration Project at Willamette Park as a strong candidate to receive the funds, the fee in lieu funds. Staff also proposes to update approval criteria in the river review to add a fee in lieu program, and will propose a new implementation action that this program will go into effect when the South Reach plan goes into effect. So that you can see the next slide has the motions, these 4 motions. And again, these are conceptual that we will bring back the code language on May 26th.
Thank you very much. I will ask if anyone has any questions or comments on these items. Katie.
Well, thanks for seeing that, because I just, and I wish I'd gotten, I just kind of discovered all these things about the docks. I know it was in the South Reach plan and everything, but I think of the river as kind of a common, and these docks that stick out, I'm really wondering, you're making the case that we shouldn't put a stop on new docks, but I'm just wondering, even 7 new docks seems like a lot. So I'm just wondering, I get this feeling when I've kayaked past the docks is that everybody wants to put a bigger one out there. Every new one seems to be actually bigger and a little fancier and longer and sticks out farther. What is going to, what kinds, you've referred to changes to the code. What would those be like? what would change. And then the other thing is, it just kind of bothers me a little bit about, I know I'm asking, but I'm trying to be fast here. I'm just wondering if there's a way to buy out some of these docks too, because it seems to me that just like when you put a swing set in your backyard, at some point, all you want to do is get rid of that swing set. And I'm wondering if there's anything like that that happens with homeowners along the river, where at some point they loved having their dock because their teenage kids would go out and run around on the river. And then later it's just a big hassle. So is there a way to catch those, end of life cycle docks and see if you can get rid of them instead of just assume that everybody on the, and I don't know, because I don't live on the river. I don't know what kind of a status symbol those docks are, or whatever. So I'm almost kind of feeling like I'm not sure if I want to vote for this, even though you've done a lot of work on it, and I apologize, but it just seems like there should be more to get rid of those docks. And they're just kind of it feels like they're an artifice from another time or something. So I don't know. So back to, what was my first question? I don't even remember.
Well, I can just go over what we're proposing in the South Reach Plan, a dock development standard that says new docks need to be located outside of shallow water habitat, and that the size limit of the dock is 200 square feet, which would reduce the size significantly for a lot of docks that you see out there. Now, they would be able to go through river review. If a homeowner wanted a larger dock that is greater than 200 square feet, they could apply for one and conceivably get approved for it, but they would have to mitigate for the impacts of that dock.
And so how would they do that? How would they mitigate?
It's through river review. There's criteria and there's criteria as to how mitigation is done. And like we said, the other part of that package is having that fee in lieu program to restore another site if they can't restore on site. So that's how that would happen. And what we're trying to do with the existing dock replacement standard is to effectively over time, allow them, but reduce the size in them when they come in for review, because they would have to meet the dock standard. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Steph? And then after that, Mike?
Thank you. For my own education, could you maybe give a few examples? What are example conditions that might prevent an applicant from providing mitigation on site?
I'm going to turn over to one of the environmental planners on the team to answer that question.
You want me to jump in, Debbie?
Sure.
Okay, hi. So in order to do mitigation for impacts to the shallow water, we look for mitigation that is for the features and functions that are being impacted. So you would need to do mitigation within the remaining shallow water habitat on your site. Or near that, so that you're improving the conditions. That would mean planting on the banks. Usually you get, we want more trees on the banks, more native vegetation. There can be other mechanisms like installing beneficial structures, large wood structures and other structures within the shallow water. But you need to have space on your site to do that. And that can be really challenging depending on how big the site is and the uses of your site, because some of those improvements are for natural resources are contradictory to other uses within the site. So it becomes challenging often to get mitigation for features and functions on a site, keeping in mind that we require a 1.5 to 1 ratio, minimum mitigation ratio. So you have to do 1.5 size of what you impacted. So that's why the fee in lieu becomes kind of important.
Okay. And again, thank you. Follow-up question, if I may. Okay, great. I'm looking at the chair. Would that fee, do you imagine it might be a flat fee, or would it be, based on what that mitigation might provide.
Is
it flat or are there others? Thank you, Sally.
I'll jump in on that. The Bureau of Environmental Services and BPS are talking with a consultant to develop that fee in lieu. So whatever the calculator would be, and to help us develop that program. So it would not be a flat fee. It would be based on impacts.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to hear the 200 square foot limitation without going through a review. That's like 10 by 20, right? If I figure it right. Does staff have any idea what the average size of docks that are currently out there are? Like, I know Waverly put in a dock that must be 100 feet long by 20 feet wide. They're huge, some really huge docks out there. Number one, do you have any data that shows what the average size is? Number two, if they do, I'm trying to remember, if they do significant repair on the dock, do they have to then meet that 200 square foot limitation? Or can they rebuild at the same size?
Thank you. And I'm going to piggyback on that question. Does the dock area include the catwalk that goes out to it, or would it be the walking?
So we are talking about the dock structure itself and not the gangway. I'm trying to figure out what order to answer all these questions. We do have data on overwater structures, but it was not specific to just docks. And so we weren't able to fully aggregate and figure out that this standard is applied to, is for residential docks, again, just to clarify. But also, Mike, yes, if there was significant replacement, significant repair, we are proposing that they meet the new dock standard.
Good.
And I can just jump in. So one of the things is, and what we're just a little bit more clarity on what it would mean for a replacement dock. I have to put on my video here, sorry. So we're allowing a little bit more flexibility. What we're thinking right now in terms of the concept is we allow a little bit more flexibility for existing docks. You would still need to do an alternatives analysis to try to minimize what your impact, and if you can get outside of shallow water habitat as a replacement, you would have to do that. But if it's, if the whole riverfront is shallow water habitat, there's not a good spot for it, then what we're allowing for is this in lieu fee, at least for now, or future mitigation bank you could replace what is already there. And you would still need to minimize impacts, but you could do it in shallow water habitat as compared to a new dock, which you would not be able to.
I have one more question for me. Is it the in lieu fee? I'm just curious, how much do you think that might cost in terms of program design versus fee collected? Staff time. Would it bring in more money than it takes to design the program with this few situations?
Sally, do you want to?
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what it will cost to establish the program. What I do know is that there is a fund already existing at the Bureau of Environmental Services, and they do accept money for a variety of other things, and it would be a sub fund to that. So that's not, sometimes that could be a lift that could take some it could cost some, but I'm not sure what it will take to develop the in lieu fee. We are starting to talk with the consultant, and we can provide you with more information at our meeting later this month.
Well, obviously don't want to belabor it because staff time costs money, but I think we should I like the idea of an in lieu fee, but obviously piggybacking on the existing efforts makes a lot of sense. And I would be a little concerned if we end up spending, $30,000 of staff time and the in lieu fee never brings in more than $5 or something like that. Mike, do you have a question?
Oh no, I was thinking back to Katie's comments. It would be interesting if there in fact was the ability to have a willing seller's program for folks who were tired of maintaining their docks.
Well, there certainly could be some, I mean, there are groups that purchase easements across property to prevent development, and that would be a private sector approach to that.
Yeah.
So any other comments before we go to a motion on this one? All right, I will move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following. B11.1, revise the dock development standards to apply to replacement docks. B11.2, to update the exemption for normal repair and maintenance, trigger river review and dock development standard if repair to a dock exceeds 50% of the structure. B11.3, update river review approval criteria to add a fee in lieu program. And B11.4, propose new action to implement the fee in lieu program with plan adoption. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Steph. Any discussion? All right, Julie, please lead us in a vote.
Okay, Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcel,
Oh, no, I'm going to vote no, but I'm pretty sure this will pass.
Magniera,
Yes.
Routh,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes, the motion passes with 1 vote no and all the rest in favor. Thank you. And let's move on. I guess tribal collaboration will be on May 26th of the agenda. So next will be Riverfront Communities Urban Design.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Cassie Ballou, and I'm from BPS. I'm going to be presenting today on Riverfront Communities and Urban Design. I also have Laura Lillard from BPS and Hannah Bryant from the Bureau of Development Services to help answer questions on design and those along the way. So to get started, today we have 4 Riverfront Communities agenda items on the subject of urban design. I will review repealing the Macadam Corridor Design Guidelines, implementation of the Macadam Corridor Character Statement, and highlight testimony major themes, and then we'll seek a motion on items D12 and D13. For more detail on these, consult the Riverfront Communities Table D and attached memo D. Oh, stay on the previous slide, Jeff. And the revised character statement should all be helpful while we review these items. And then one quick reminder before we begin, the repeal of the guidelines and the character statement are under the purview of the Design Commission. And today the PSC has an opportunity to provide comments and recommendations on these items, which will then go to the Design Commission on July 16th for a public hearing and decision. And in the materials, you received the original date for this hearing was July 2nd, but we had to move it because of schedule conflicts due to COVID-19. And additionally, prior to this hearing, we'll be working on additional outreach in the form of an online survey. So moving on to a recap, staff recommends the repeal of the Macadam Corridor Design Guidelines and the implementation of the Design Overlay Zone Amendment citywide design guidelines. Previous testimony was supportive of this change, but concerned about losing context found in the Macadam guidelines. In response to these concerns, staff recommended including a character statement within the citywide design guidelines. The statement has been structured to align with and support Guideline 2, entitled Build on the Character and Local Identity of the Place. It does this by addressing community character, architectural character, and natural resources specific to the Macadam area. And testimony received followed similar themes, which will be reviewed on the following slide. But as a final note here, the repeal of the Macadam guidelines will move forward within the River Plan South Reach plan. However, the character statement will be adopted as an amendment to the citywide design guidelines once they've been adopted by City Council. This is the first character statement to be created and will serve as a template for others to come. Next slide. Major testimony themes have been reflected in the revised statement. For more detail, again, refer to the revised character statement, the memo on Table D. In summation, the 3 major testimony themes are highlighted in the statement and focus on, first, the development along Macadam corridors. Staff specifically focused on encouraging development to create an environment that prioritizes pedestrians and reinforces Macadam's boulevard character. Next, development along the Willamette Riverfront Staff included guidance on how development should respond to riverfront and trails within the district. And finally, connectivity between McAdam Boulevard and the riverfront. Staff included more language which stresses the importance of improving this physical and visual access, particularly east-west connections on north-south sites between McAdam Boulevard and the riverfront. Next slide. We've prepared a motion for you to consider. We also have one last-minute addition to this motion language. At the end of the motion, please add for a public hearing, just to recognize that the public will have a chance to testify here. And with that, I'll turn this over to Chair Spivak for discussion.
Any questions? Or would someone like to make this motion? Mike.
Yes, I did send staff a change that I was hoping we would put in. We do have the ability to add something, do we not?
Yes, we're just doing straw polls for staff direction, so.
Yeah, okay.
Thought for guys.
You want to know what it is?
Yes.
Okay. Under community character, I'm suggesting adding the word ecological as follows. Paragraph 1, it says development should recognize the recreational, social, and cultural values. I suggest adding ecological. Development should recognize the recreational, ecological, social, and cultural values of the riverfront through on-site features and river responsive design.
Staff, can you tell us on the fly whether that would be a friendly amendment?
I would agree with that amendment, yes. Or we would agree with that amendment.
You can speak for everybody. Thank you, Cassie. Any other comments? Okay. Then I will read the amendment because I have it in front of me. So I move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following. D13, forward the revised McAdam character statement draft as amended by the PSC and adding the word ecological to the Design Commission for a public hearing. If I got that wrong, tell me. If not, is there a second?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any discussion? All right, Julie, please call a vote for that.
Okay, Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Hey.
Larcel,
Yes.
Magnera,
Yes.
Routh,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes, it was unanimous, passes, and now we're up to number 12, also McAdam Plan District.
Sorry, didn't unmute myself. So the next item from table D is item D12, which highlights the testimony received on the need for an updated McAdam Plan District. BPS staff agrees that the McAdam Plan District zoning regulations need to be updated to align with more recent planning efforts, and staff recommends a Riverfront Communities Action C6D, which addresses an update to the McAdam Plan District zoning regulations. And this is our recommended priority to ensure future development works towards meeting city goals and plans such as accommodating growth and responding to climate change. Next slide.
Mike, do you have a question right now or you want to wait?
Oh, I just keep forgetting to lower my hand.
Fair enough.
Right.
Good exercise.
Yeah.
You're up in the air like that.
So with that, we have prepared a motion for you to consider, and I'll turn this over again to Chair Spivak for discussion.
Any questions? I will move to amend volume 1 of the proposed draft to be consistent with the following. D12, proposed new action C6D, to conduct a community planning process to update the McAdam Plan District to reflect current and future community desires and to be consistent with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, River Plan South Reach, and citywide design guidelines. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Julie, let's vote.
Bortolazzo,
Yes.
Hauk,
Yes.
Larcel,
Yes.
Magnera,
Yes.
Routh,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes, motion passes. And that is the last one, unless staff has something I missed. Oh, you want to give us next steps? Thank you.
Yes, I'll just give you some quick next steps. So we'll be coming back to you on May 26th with some proposed archaeological code amendments. You have a draft in your proposed draft, but we've spent some time with Oregon, Washington, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs to kind of refine our proposal, along with Laura John. Laura John, our Tribal Relations Director, will be joining us and can answer any other questions you have about this or the tribal program related to the South Reach. We will also, I believe at the last session, you asked for a briefing about progress related to the houseless population. And we will have some miscellaneous amendments. We have a lot of detailed amendments Bureau of Development Services provided to us. And then we will also come back with the actual code that represents the straw polls that you took today.
Okay, thank you.
And we're hoping that that will conclude your work on the River Plan South Reach.
Okay, Mike?
You're here.
Right.
I want to thank staff. I think staff's done a really great job with a pretty arduous process, pretty complex issues. And I have to say they've been very responsive to my concerns, as well as a lot of other folks who have weighed in on this project. So staff deserves kudos. BPS, BES, BDS, Parks, all of them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I totally agree. I think that the reason we had a lot of things that we disagree with staff on is because staff did a great job of listening to us in testimony and making changes creatively and putting it in front of us so we could proceed forward. So I will continue this work session to May 26th. And I will mention to PSC commissioners that we recognize that in the past couple of days, the challenge of juggling paper and screens, or especially if you just have screens available. So we're going to try and figure out a way to get people materials ahead of the meeting in paper. And so next meeting, we're going to have the River Plan South Reach, and we're also going to have the hearing for the expiration date of the extension project. Also hearing a recommendation. So we'll be making some recommendations at our next meeting. Do you have one more comment, Mike?
Yeah, last one. Yeah, I was really frustrated. We couldn't get out on the river and we couldn't do our bike and walks and so forth. I produced a document called Wild on the Willamette in 2003. Most of it's still very relevant today. I kept meaning to bring it to hand it to people. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So I'm going to try to figure out if I can mail those to you. So if you go out and explore the Willamette on the river or by your bike or whatever, you've got a field guide to help you.
And if you do it by our next meeting, then we can virtually hand it from one person to the next during the Zoom call.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike, I just want to say I've been looking for a reason to go on extended bike rides. So if you need bike couriering, I'm here.
All right.
Willing.
So can I just say one thing? I just wanted to thank Mike for being in the group because it was just so helpful. I felt like we were being shepherded. You know, staff is wonderful. And it was also wonderful to have you there to kind of shepherd us through it. So thank you so much. I mean, really, it's a real service. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned until May 26th.